It just goes like this. If people vote for Christian nationalists, what are they doing which is un-American? The answer? Fucking nothing. Like the most American thing I can think of. The most American thing I can think of is that a Canadian...
Absolutely what happened.
Not only is it not what happened, but within the framework that you're talking about, you just said it's not un-American to amend...
How did it not happen?
Hang on. You just said it's not in any way un-American to amend the First Amendment. American
Do you not
that.
believe in the First Amendment anymore?
That has nothing to do with the argument. What is un-American about amending the First Amendment?
Well, again, the American is this... You hate America?
On liberalism, on the liberal view, right?
So you think America's
It's
nothing?
Let each other finish, please.
It's not built on any sort of ethnicity. It's not built on any sort of cultural union.
You ever watch someone try to defend liberalism against a guy who's actually thought through his positions? That's what we're about to witness here. Andrew Wilson, this dude does not mess around. He's going head to head with a feminist who thinks she can defend American values while simultaneously arguing that America has no actual values. Like, watch how this plays out. She's going to sit there and tell you that life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness means something deep and profound. And then when pressed on it, she's got absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, Andrew's over here dismantling the entire liberal framework piece by piece, showing how it's just an empty vessel that can be filled with literally anything, including everything liberals claim to hate. This is one of those debates where you can actually see someone realize mid-conversation that their worldview is built on sand. Let's get into it.
Here's a bunch of un-American stuff, depending on when you were alive. Universal suffrage, pretty fucking un-American. Abolishing slavery was pretty fucking un-American. Homosexuality was definitely un-American. Age of consent laws were un-American. Incest laws were un-American. Income taxes were un-American. Sex outside of wedlock was un-American. Refusal to duel when being called out was un-American. Not being white was un-American. Co-ed schools were un-American. Black people in white schools, so un-American, we needed the military involved. The list goes on and on. But according to erudite, Christian nationalism is un-American because America basically begins in the early 20th century based on Lincoln models of federalism. That's what's American. Part of that, of course, should be not listening to a person who grew up under a king in a constitutional monarchy like she did. Gross. Bunch of fascist bootlickers over in Maple Land. That's pretty fucking un-American too. Christian nationalism is as compatible with Americanism as the liberal order of amoral systems allows, which means perfectly compatible because there isn't any ought to tell it no. The entire proposition from the liberal angle itself is self-refuting. It just goes like this. If people vote for Christian nationalists, what are they doing which is un-American? The answer? Fucking nothing. If they vote in a KKK, Nazi fascist, Hugo Boss, SS uniform wearing lunatic who packs the court, persecutes all non-whites, all within the whim and the confines of the amoral system, then what's un-American about that? And the answer? Fucking nothing. Because the progressive liberal system is built on nothing. Just vague appeals to my rights and my freedoms and my own system, which allows you to get rid of the system. It's absurd and self-refuting. That's my opening.
Cool. So I guess to clarify, maybe we should clarify Christian nationalism, because I feel like that's going to be a bit of the crux of the conversation. So how do you want to define it?
To the definition of Christian nationalism would just be the proposition that Christians utilize influence and authority to stay in the moral majority, and that they adopt systems towards Christian ethics.
When you say moral majority, what does that mean to you?
It means that most laws and social systems confined around Christian ethics.
Okay. So you would like to basically see a change of current statecraft to include more Christian policies?
All Christian policies.
Can I ask to what extent? Like, does this...
To as much of an extent as liberalism allows, which is all extents.
Okay, so when you advocate for Christian nationalism, though, I'm sure you and I would probably agree, if, say, the more of the moral majority becomes Christian, particularly in the way that maybe you're advocating for, we would probably move in the direction of reducing constitutional policy and increasing Christian policy specifically, probably all the way up to including theocracy.
No, they're not incompatible.
So you don't think that
constitutional policies, so under liberalism, this is a great thing about liberalism. So do you remember, like, you had this conversation with a guy the other day I don't know how long ago it was, but he was like a fan of mine. He called in. It was about Christian nationalism. I think you got the clip on your channel. There was a point there where I started laughing because he said basically what I did. He was like, my proposal is that I want all the systems and this and that to kind of reflect the image of my preferences. And you were like, fuck that. You're not allowed to bastardize my religion by implementing policies against, what my preferences are. And I thought, that's like the most American thing I can think of. The most American thing I can think of is that a Canadian immigrant is like, you know what? This is my country now. And you're not going to fucking bastardize it with whatever your shit is because I don't want you to. And the other guy's like, I don't give a shit what you want. We're going to do it anyway. And then it goes vice versa. And it's like, that is liberalism. Ultimately, if we want to get rid of alcohol via an amendment, we can. If we want to bring it back via an amendment, we can and have. If we want to get rid of guns, we can and have. We want to bring them back, we can and have. It's like everything is permitted.
So by your logic then, Christian nationalists not only are trying to win the culture, they're trying to win the state, to impose Christian policy on the state.
Well, they're
through Congress.
They're imposing liberalism on the state, actually.
Well, in this case, I don't want to slip between words.
I'm not going to equivocate. If Christian nationalists amend every single constitutional amendment within the confines of liberalism to reflect only Christian policy, by your metric, that's liberalism.
So the issue is that I'm not like a democratic absolutist, right? I don't believe in democracy in the state. I believe in like some level of limited democracy. In fact, even now we have like electoral democracy. We have elected representatives. We don't have direct popular vote, which I think is good. I think that that's a better democratic system than, for example, pure absolute democracy, like popular vote. So there's always limits on democracy, right? So when you say liberalism, I think the issue is like liberalism to you just mean, it seems like what it means to you is we can vote for stuff. No. Is that what it means? What does it mean to you?
It's what you outlined in your opening. Liberalism is just a sequence of systems. It's science, man, and it's building shit, and it's industry, and it's all of these isms, which really are just confined to, I want a system. So liberalism is an amoral system.
Do you think science is liberalism?
No, but I think that liberals adopt science as part of their system.
Well, yeah, they allow it. Do you think capitalism is liberalism?
I think they adopt capitalism as part of their system.
Could they adopt other things?
Sure.
Okay, so then what's liberalism?
Liberalism is an adaptation of an amoral system.
What is this? Sorry, at a statecraft level, what does this mean?
That you have a system which is an amoral system.
Why is the amoral piece essential to
because
the liberal piece?
That's why you prefer secularism. You want a system which is amoral. So it's based on individualism. It's based on...
Is individualism amoral?
Yeah. Well, from the liberal view, it is, yeah.
How is individualism amoral?
Because there's no ought. There's no ought under a liberal system for you to do anything.
Sure there is. There's oftentimes, right? Like a liberal system doesn't impose any certain moral. Well, the most common consensual norm...
What did you say? A liberal system doesn't impose any certain morals.
That doesn't make it... so when you say
that
amoral...
means amoral.
Oh, so like they're agnostic.
No, they're amoral. It's worse than agnostic.
How is that?
Because
how are these? What's the difference between amoral and agnostic on morality?
Yeah, so you can be agnostic about something which is moral or immoral, right? That's true. But that doesn't mean you're amoral. But what you're looking for is a system which is amoral. So you're saying, like, look, we're not going to make any moral prescriptions because that's not what the function of the state is.
So do you think that what the founding fathers did was amoral? Like, it's not something to respect. It's not something valuable. What do you think about the founding fathers?
What does that have to do with anything?
The founding fathers created the American world. You're saying, it seems like you're saying America is liberalism and this liberalism is weak. Or do you think America is something else?
It became liberalism when you destroyed the Republic with universal suffrage in the 14th Amendment.
The Republic was just the language utilized to talk about a specific type of democracy, right?
No, it had foundationalism. You're talking about 39 out of 50 signers, only 3 of them were deists. And foundationally, the states, under the 10th Amendment, were allowed to adopt their own religions and did. It was only until we got to the 14th Amendment, way later, that this was no longer the case.
No.
And in your opening, you got that wrong.
The Establishment and Free Exercise Clause specifically said Congress shall make no law respecting an established religion prohibiting the free exercise
At the
thereof.
federal level, that's true.
The federal level implied to the states.
No, that happened later under the 14th Amendment.
No,
In fact,
under the Constitution.
I'll show you. Brian, pull up the 14th Amendment stops states from adopting religion. I'll show you so that you understand how the process worked.
So do you think that the Founding Fathers established a religion for the
No,
nation?
they established the 10th Amendment, which says that all rights which are not given to the federal government are given to the prospective states. Because the First Amendment covered that federally, this was part of a compromise that...
Okay, so here's where things start getting really interesting. Andrew just dropped the core of his entire argument, and she completely missed it. He's saying liberalism is an amoral system, meaning it has no built-in moral framework, no ought, no direction. It's just a procedural mechanism. And she thinks he's attacking America when really he's attacking the emptiness of her worldview. Look at what she's doing here. She keeps trying to say, well, the Founding Fathers wanted this, and the American ethos is that, but every time Andrew presses her on what that actually means, she retreats into vague platitudes. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Okay, what does that mean? She can't tell you. Because the second you define it concretely, you're admitting there's an actual moral framework, which means you're no longer neutral, which means you can't claim your system is just about freedom anymore. And this is the trap liberals always fall into. They want to have it both ways. They want to say America stands for something specific and unchangeable, but they also want to say America is just whatever we vote for at any given moment. Andrew's forcing her to pick one, and watch how she squirms every single time. The amendment question is genius. He keeps asking, if we can amend anything, including the First Amendment, what's un-American about that? And she has no answer. Because if America is just a process, just a system, just democracy, then anything that happens through that process is by definition American, including Christian nationalism, including theocracy, including literally anything. She tries to pivot to the ethos and the Founding Fathers, but Andrew already destroyed that line of reasoning in the opening. The Founding Fathers allowed states to have official religions. The federal separation was a compromise, not a principle. She doesn't know her history, and it shows. And notice how when he asks her about Irish culture versus Spanish culture, she can't articulate the difference beyond they're Catholic. That's because she genuinely believes culture is just people voting on stuff. There's no substance, no identity, no roots. Just a bunch of individuals with preferences sitting around taking votes. This is what happens when you build a worldview on nothing. Eventually, someone like Andrew comes along and asks you to defend it, and you realize there's nothing actually there. Let me know in the comments what you think about this whole amoral system argument.
Because of the Articles of Confederation. So the Articles of Confederation initially were the libertarian wet dream, but they didn't work because states couldn't have uniform commerce or uniform dollars or a uniform military. So they adopted a form of federalism and compromised. The compromise was the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment stated that actually states could have their own religions, and they did. Almost all the states had their own religion post-constitutional ratification. And most people don't know that.
By own religion, what do you mean? Do you just mean the test clause?
No. They had state religions.
The test clause. You had to be
No,
to
not
be
a
in
test
power.
clause. They had actual state religions. Inside each independent state, they had their own religions, minus, I think, 2 or 3.
So why did the federal United States not have a religion? Why did it allow the states to make those choices?
Because of the 10th Amendment.
What was the principle? What were the Founding Fathers trying to do? What do you think the Founding
They were
Fathers cared
trying
about?
to separate the power of Federalists between Anti-Federalists and Federalists.
So
So they
if-
compromised on 2 major amendments. The Second Amendment, which initially was way looser in language, and then they compromised on the 10th Amendment as well, because states wanted to have their own militias, they wanted to have their own militaries, they wanted to have their own currencies. Congress is like, look, we need to have the power to raise armies, we need to have the power to coin money. If you allow us to have those 2 powers, then all the other prospective powers will give to the states. which they did. That included religion.
So if the founding fathers intended for it to be a Christian nation, to have some level of...
They intended for each state to be able to govern as they saw fit in order to implement religions if they chose to.
To the exclusion at a federal level specifically of any religion, right?
But that's not in what's in contest here.
That is in what's contest,
Why?
Right? If we're talking about America, we're talking about the nation. We're
Yeah,
talking
can the
about the
First
founding
Amendment-
fathers,
can-
the minds behind the founding of the
The founding
nation.
fathers put in amendment processes for us to amend things, including the
Sure.
First Amendment, right?
Sure, yeah, but why, if they wanted to blend church and state, why wouldn't they write that in?
They did blend church and state
They did
because
not. They
under
have-
the 10th Amendment, they allowed states to adopt state religions. It was only when the Supreme Court looked at the 14th Amendment way later in our history that they decided, and by the way, that amendment had nothing to even do with this. That was about citizenship.
State religions isn't the same thing as America having a federal religion. We realize this, right?
Whoever postulated that we needed to have a federalized religion?
Well, I'm talking about separation of church and state.
Yeah, but
for America.
If states can have their own religion inside the state and it becomes the state religion, does that, in your opinion, violate that separation of church and state?
If there's a test clause, yeah, it probably potentially would violate that. So if the state imposes a test clause for federal power, that would be an issue. And
Do
in
you
fact,
know when the last...
it was super common at the time that most states had clauses. In fact, the founding fathers were so intense about ensuring separation of power that despite most colonies at the time having a test clause for holding power of being religious, they explicitly barred it in, what was it, Article 6.
Oh, yeah? Then how come in Maryland you had to declare until 1960-something, I believe, that you believed in God in order to hold office?
Because in Maryland, they made that decision. But at a federal level, well, we're not talking about Maryland. We're talking about America.
Yeah, America...
Is Maryland America?
America is a coalition of states which have federalized. That's
Sure.
what's going on.
But don't you think that the Constitution of America maybe matters when we're talking about the ethos of America?
Sure.
Okay, so when
you mean
the
that
founding
amendable?
fathers...
You mean that completely amendable thing?
Well, completely amendable makes it sound way looser than it is. Amending and adding amendments
It is way
incredibly
looser.
difficult.
Look, what's un-American about amending the First Amendment?
Nothing.
Okay. So then, inside of your worldview, it's completely constitutional to amend the First Amendment
Well,
to get rid. Hang on. To get rid of the Establishment Clause, that would be totally appropriate under your
I think
worldview.
that would be a violation of the American ethos. I think it's bad, and
How?
Because America's built on these things. I think that the founding fathers.
You don't believe America? Okay. Does America
Hold on.
have?
Do I get to finish my thoughts, or are you going to interrupt me?
Go ahead.
Okay. Right. I think what's really important here is that, like, the founding fathers, I think, are essential to understanding the ethos of America. I don't think they're the only piece, but if we want to look at like a litany of America over time, what we have, for example, is the founding fathers, despite the nation being dominantly Christian, despite the states having test religious clauses, the founding fathers looking at that going, no, we need a separation of church and state.
That's
it's
not
essential.
what happened.
That is absolutely what happened.
Not only is it not what happened, but within the framework that you're talking about, you just said it's not un-American to amend.
How did it not happen?
Hang on. You just said it's not in any way un-American to amend the First Amendment. The First Amendment is
I should have clarified that, because when we say American, I'm meaning the ethos. What I should have said is it's not anti-constitutional. The Constitution would allow for it.
Okay, then let's follow that line of logic and see if that's true. Does American have any sort of like ethnic ethos?
Yeah.
What is it?
Dominantly white culture, hegemonically.
So that's part of the American ethos?
Yeah, to some degree. Yeah, significantly, right? Like white
Should it stay that
Protestant-
way?
I like it, yeah.
So America should stay a white Protestant nation?
But that's not the central piece of the ethos. You said, does it have a cultural ethos? And I said,
I'm asking
white is one of them.
should it stay white?
No, I don't care about the white
And that's
piece.
not part of American ethos.
How is that the case? Absolutely something that can be a part of the ethos and also change. Because the ethos here that's central isn't the whiteness that I was pointing to. It's
what?
some of the cultural values that come in. For example, Protestant work ethic, right? Taking value in the product that you make as
And
a
if
company.
America no longer had any of that and became completely atheistic, but still followed these constitutional amendments, that's still plenty American, right?
As long as I hold to central ethos of what I think the American dream and vision
that's
which
why
we
I'm asking
outlined,
you
for example,
if
with the founding fathers at the Declaration of Independence.
Well, then if it's not whiteness and it's not anything,
whiteness.
and it's not anything cultural,
It is cultural.
$69.
Oh my God.
It means
Sorry.
that according to
No idea what happened there.
Yeah.
I apologize.
It's okay. No
if
worries.
it's not, so here's what I'm asking: if it's not ethnic, and
What do
it's-
you think American ethos
and
is?
it's
Do you
not-
have any American ethos?
and it's not cultural,
I
and
said
it's not.
it is cultural.
It's cultural.
Yeah.
Okay. So what are the cultural things? What is American culture?
Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, doing things at work, ingenuity, discovery.
life, liberty, pursuit of happiness.
Wait, what do you think American ethos is?
And hang on, what was the other thing you said?
I think ingenuity.
Ingenuity.
Those are some of them.
So as long as
Do you reject these as part of the American ethos?
I do. So as long as none of these, life, liberty, or pursuit of happiness or ingenuity is violated, then it's in the spirit of America.
Potentially, we would have to look at it in a relativistic, right? Like these ethos-like things, we have to understand like what we're talking about. You'd have to give me an example.
That's what I'm asking you about, is what we're talking about. So if any of these
so what
things,
do you think is American?
Well, so I think that what's core at the central kind of product of Americanism is this idea of systemic liberalism. The system itself
What is
what
systemic
American.
liberalism mean?
What's that?
What is systemic liberalism?
Yeah, so it's just the idea that like there's a secular separation, there's systems in place within the constitutional confines, there's things which we're appealing to in law. I don't
like
think
America?
I don't think that liberalism and modernity is doing anything other than looking at those systems. I think that originally our founders wanted to have something which was much more akin to ethno-nationalism, for sure. I think that they wanted to have something that was much more akin to nobody voting in universal suffrage at all, because they didn't give anybody the right to vote.
Why?
So I don't think that those things were foundational to the American experience, because the founders didn't allow it.
Why didn't they?
Because they didn't want people to come over here who weren't Western English, basically.
That's not why.
Yeah, it is why.
No, you can read it in Federalist Number 2. Like the argument for suffrage is very clear from Hamilton.
Okay, wait.
On suffrage.
Have you read the Anti-Federalist Papers?
No.
Do you realize there's Federalist Papers, there's the Anti-Federalist Papers?
Yes.
These were compromises which were made from the original Articles of Confederation.
What did suffrage mean to
Originally,
the founding fathers?
the 39, I believe it's 39 out of 50 delegates who signed the Constitution. Only 3 were deists. Most of them were Protestants, loyalist Protestants, by the way. And on top of all of that, most of them wanted only white states, and made it very clear they only wanted white states. They put that into the very ethos of what they considered Americana. Do I think that modern liberalism is looking at any sort of peace?
Dude, she just said relativistic. Do you understand what just happened? She literally admitted that American values are relative, meaning they mean nothing, meaning they change based on whoever's in power, which is exactly what Andrew's been saying this entire time. This is the part where it all falls apart for her. She's trying so hard to hold on to this idea that America stands for something concrete and unchangeable, but every time she opens her mouth, she proves Andrew's point. Systemic liberalism, what the hell does that even mean? It means nothing. It's word salad. It's the kind of thing you say when you don't actually have an answer, but you need to sound like you do. And watch what happens when he asks her about the Founding Fathers' actual intentions. She has to admit that the founders wanted an ethno-state. They wanted limited suffrage. They wanted states to have official religions. They didn't want what we have now. So if we're appealing to the founders as the source of American values, we have to admit that modern liberalism completely betrayed them. She knows this. That's why she keeps trying to separate the ethos from what the founders actually believed and did. The whiteness question is brutal. He asks if America should stay white since it was founded as a white Protestant nation, and she says no, but then can't explain how ethnicity isn't part of the American ethos, because obviously it was. Obviously the founders cared about that. They said so explicitly. But admitting that would mean admitting that liberal universalism is a completely different project than what America originally was. So she has to pretend culture is just abstract values floating in the ether with no connection to actual people groups or traditions. This is the thing about liberal ideology that drives me insane. It's so disconnected from reality. It pretends nations are just ideas, cultures are just values, and people are just interchangeable units who happen to agree on some procedural rules. But that's not how any of this actually works. Nations are people. Cultures are traditions passed down through generations. Values are embedded in communities with shared histories and identities. Andrew gets this. That's why he keeps hammering on the people group plus ethical system formula. That's what culture actually is, not life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean in practice. Like, Iran could claim they believe in life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Does that make them American? Obviously not. Because those words don't actually mean anything without a specific people and tradition filling them with content. She's completely lost at this point. She knows she can't defend her position, but she also can't admit Andrew's right, because that would mean everything she believes is built on a lie. So she just keeps talking in circles. Drop a comment if you think Andrew's won this already, or if you think she's going to pull off some kind of comeback.
Oh, is modern liberalism looking at any sort of cultural environmentalism in order to say, hey, this is what America is? No. All you can appeal to is systems. That's it. That's all you have is a system. Liberalism is a system of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and ingenuity, whatever the fuck that means. Doesn't even mean anything.
Of course.
Just what?
What do you mean?
What is life, liberty, and my life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness? I could completely amend the First Amendment and still do all of those things.
I think the issue is that most of the country would oppose you amending the First Amendment because the First Amendment is foundational to what makes America great.
So what? So what if most of the country opposes it? It's built into liberalism. If
what
matters
if the whole country opposes it is because America is this consensual emergence of a bunch of people that believe in something.
And what if we decide that we don't believe in the First Amendment anymore and amend it? What's un-American about that?
Do you not believe in the First Amendment anymore?
That has nothing to do with the argument. What is un-American about amending the First Amendment?
Well, again, the American is this ethos. It would be technically constitutional, but I would argue that it would be a bad constitutional move, and I think it would violate the Founding Fathers. And I think the Founding Fathers were onto something when they made that first separation of free speech and separation of church and state.
Should we adhere to everything the Founders said or no?
No, not necessarily.
Well, then who cares if we violate it?
There's
who cares?
What do you mean, who cares?
Yeah, if you're look, if you violate the things that the Founders wanted, that's not un-American. But this is un-American because it might violate what the Founders wanted. You're in contradictions.
These are not contradictions. Pluralism allows for competing values, right? Obviously, right? And so what you're kind of doing right now is you're sitting here and you're being like, well, there's two children. They're your children one side and your husband's on the other side.
Yeah.
Who are you picking? And let's say I pick the two children.
Yeah.
You're going, why do you hate your husband? And I'm saying, that's not what's happening here
I don't even
at
know
all.
That, first of all, that's not the analogy. The analogy would actually be this. You have your husband and your children on both sides. You pick both. This other guy has his husband and children, and he doesn't pick both.
That's not how pluralism and monism work.
Wait a second. As long as you're saying that both of these sets are both moral behaviors because you have an amoral system, meaning you wouldn't restrict either of these things.
That's not necessary. We absolutely restrict people's behaviors, and we often restrict people's behaviors for the benefit of the state, right? Laws exist.
And who makes them?
The people that we elect. Congress.
I see. So if we elect people who vote in different laws, how's that un-American?
So it would be against the American ethos if a whole bunch of Christian nationalists, for example, convince people that we should actually reduce things like liberty. I think that we would be moving away from
You
the
wouldn't
American
be reducing
ethos.
liberty.
Absolutely.
It would just be a different kind of liberty.
If you start imposing church into state, for example, and the only religion that you can practice is Christianity, that would be violating liberty.
How? If we amend the process, how?
Even if you amend the process. So you can amend the process to make us a less free nation. But what I would say is that would be wrong. That would be un-American, yes.
How?
Because America is built on life and liberty.
America is built on the fact that you can amend America.
No, America is built on... Why
do we have an amendment process then?
Why wouldn't TJ, when he's writing the Declaration of Independence, why wouldn't he, for example, say, America is just what we vote for. It's just like consensus stuff, man. It's just like loosey-goosey. He says specifically an ethos that drives the dream, right? And you're saying, well, this ethos, this dream, it's just silly. It's nothing. I mean, it's just not nothing, right? It makes me go,
it's foundationally
do you hate America?
On liberalism, on the liberal view, right?
So you think America's nothing?
Let each other finish, please.
It's not built on any sort of ethnicity. It's not built on any sort of cultural union.
Well, I did say culture.
Well, but you just said life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
Can that not be cultural values?
Yeah, no.
Why not? What's cultural values?
What does it mean?
What's an example of a cultural value?
Well, what the fuck does it mean?
What's an example of a cultural value, if not something like life and liberty?
A unison of cultural values are usually foundation to ethical systems.
No, they're not. So what's a cultural value that you would say that's a cultural value?
I just told you I would utilize for culture some kind of glue. That would be a unison. Otherwise, it's not cultural.
Okay, what's a Scottish cultural value? Irish. Sorry, you're Irish. That's an Irish cultural value.
Yeah, so I think that Irish cultural values would, again, revolve around foundationalism, religious ethical systems.
Like what?
Well, for Ireland, I think the Protestant Catholic.
So the cultural value of being Irish is being Catholic.
I think that there's a union between the people group and the ethical foundations.
So how are Irish people different than British people who are also on the back of Anglican or Catholic?
Well, because they're not, right? So England has a completely different set of people groups which come from Britannians. The Britannians who came in, settled all of England. When the church came in and then they separate into Anglican, they have now a completely different set of value structures than other places do, including
Would you
in Western
call it
Europe.
Anglican?
What?
The British cultural value? So the
Well, I
only thing
would
that
say-
makes British and Irish people different is one's
No,
Catholic
I
and
said
one's
different people group. Steelman my
What's a cultural value for Irish people?
Steelman my position real quick.
I'm asking you actually to steelman mine because you're insisting that when I list these ethos,
How
it's
can I
nothing and
steelman your
empty.
position when you're asking me questions?
I'm asking you questions because you seem to be unsatisfied with the answers that I
Yeah.
have supplied.
People
because
group,
you're not granting me.
people group plus ethical
If you're
system.
if you're gonna get us on interrupting, it has to be mutual. Okay.
Yeah.
So I gave you an example of a couple of cultural ethos, and you said, "What? This is nothing. It doesn't mean anything."
Well, these
and so
are-
then I said,
Wait, hold on. Let
so
her
then I
finish.
said,
Fine.
"Can you give me an example of, let's say, Irish cultural
Okay,
ethos?"
sure.
Hold on. And you said Catholic, and I said, "What makes them different then from just another group of people that are also Catholic?"
They have
There's-
different set values.
Like what?
Like, for instance, they have different religious foundationalism. They have different values in their society that
What
they
is an
honor.
Irish cultural value? Give me one.
Not life, not liberty, not pursuit of happiness. How am I wrong?
I don't know. I'm not Irish.
Well, I don't know.
So
If it's
Irish's values
if
is
it's
just being
isms,
Catholic?
if it's just isms of like a cultural value is life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, then it's like, okay, then cultural values are also just not life, not liberty, and not pursuit of happiness then? Does that make any sense to you?
That's not what anyone's saying. I'm literally
It is
just,
what you're saying.
Let
It's
each, other,
not.
let each other finish, please.
I'm just asking you for a single example of an Irish
Yeah,
cultural
when you're
value,
talking-
and you're just saying,
let each other finish,
and you're
please.
just saying Catholic. So what's an example of an Irish cultural value?
So, do you agree that Catholic would be an example of an Irish cultural value?
I wouldn't say it's unique to Ireland. No.
So, why would it need to be
Well,
unique?
we're talking about
Is
Ireland.
life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness unique to America?
So are you just saying that cultures don't really exist? They're just the religions. Like there's no difference
No,
between
what a culture-
Irish people
Let-
and
let each other finish.
and
Let each other
another
finish,
and
please.
another group that's Catholic as
What a
well,
cul- what-
like Spanish
yeah.
people.
So what a culture is going to be the grouping of the people, the consideration of the value group of those people, and then the foundations of those people.
So what's an example of an Irish cultural ethos?
Catholicism,
So how is that different than Spanish people who are also Catholic?
because they have a different people group,
So what emerges that's different between these two groups?
language, customs, orders,
Yeah, values.
not just values. No,
Of
yeah,
course
they can
not.
have-
Of course not just
They
values.
can have, actually, they have a lot of shared values.
Sure, of course, yeah.
But again, you have to take the people group, then you have to take the social orders, then you have to take the foundationalism in order to create culture. For you, you're saying life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Now, I gave you concrete examples of cultural values. Can you tell me what this means? What does
Sure.
that mean?
So, if we're talking about the culture of people, I think one of the relevant things for the American culture might be, not excluded to, the founding fathers and what they thought. You know, the founding of the entire nation kind of matters. So, in the Declaration of Independence, for example, Thomas Jefferson outlines life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is a unique thing, a unique hallmark of being
Jefferson
American.
didn't sign the Constitution.
That
All right, so let's break down what just happened here because this was an absolute masterclass in exposing liberal contradictions. Andrew Wilson came in with a clear thesis. Liberalism is an empty procedural system with no moral core, which means it can be used to implement literally anything, including Christian nationalism. And over the course of 25 minutes, he proved it beyond any shadow of a doubt. Every single time this woman tried to appeal to American values or the Founding Fathers or some kind of unchangeable ethos, Andrew forced her to either admit those values came from Christianity and ethno-nationalism or admit they're completely malleable and relative. She couldn't win either way. Because the truth is, both are correct depending on which era of America you're talking about. Early America was explicitly Christian, explicitly white, explicitly limited in who could participate. Modern America pretends to be neutral and universal. These are two completely different projects. You can't appeal to both. The amendment argument was the kill shot. If America is just whatever we vote for, then voting for Christian nationalism is perfectly American. If America is supposed to be something specific and unchangeable, then modern liberalism already destroyed it by introducing universal suffrage, mass immigration, and secular governance that the founders never intended. Pick one. She couldn't. And the culture question exposed the deeper issue. Liberals genuinely believe that nations and cultures are just made up of individuals with preferences who happen to live near each other. There's no shared identity, no common heritage, no roots, just a system, just procedures, just votes. That's not a country, that's a shopping mall. Andrew understands that culture is people plus tradition plus moral framework. You can't have a culture without all three. And if you try to strip away the moral framework in the name of neutrality, you don't get neutrality. You get a power vacuum that someone else will fill. That's what Christian nationalists understand. That's what the left understands when they push their ideology through every institution. The only people who don't understand it are centrist liberals who still think we can all just get along and let the marketplace of ideas sort itself out. The marketplace of ideas doesn't sort anything out. It just rewards whoever's willing to be the most aggressive about imposing their vision. And right now, the left is winning that fight because they're not afraid to use power. Christian nationalists see this and want to fight back the same way. And liberals like this woman are standing in the middle saying, "But the rules," while both sides ignore her. Andrew Wilson won this debate. Not even close. She had no answers, no coherent worldview, just vague appeals to values she couldn't define and a history she didn't understand. That's what happens when your entire political philosophy is built on denying that worldviews exist. If you made it this far, do me a favor. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to see it, and drop a comment letting me know what you thought. Are you pro-Christian nationalism? Anti? Somewhere in the middle? I want to hear from you. This is what we do here at MB. We break down these debates, we call out the BS, and we say what everyone's thinking, but nobody's saying. Stay sharp. I'll see you in the next one.